Holiday podcast number 2 is what this is. And of course, our first Kaufman Corner of the new year, first Kaufman Corner of, I guess, technically season 3 of the Kaufman Corner. We used the first of the year as the yardstick. So thank you for joining us. For everyone who's been listening to the Kaufman Corner podcast, we appreciate it as we embark on year 3. Rany Jazayerli, the good doctor, Soren Petro, with you as we talk Royals baseball. And again, special holiday edition. Happy New Year to everybody. I want to remind you what we're doing here. We took a draft. We drafted the best all-time Royals teams, the two of us going head-to-head. You could draft a player. Once you draft that player, he's off the board. You have to draft a single season. Rany took George Brett in 1980 with pick number 1, so I can't take George Brett. He can't take George Brett in any other season, and nobody from 1980 can be taken. These are the rules, so we're eliminating an entire season every time we take a player. That whole season is gone, right? These are the rules, correct?
That is correct. And as we get down to the final picks here, the seasons on the board dwindle quickly because remember, the Royals have played 55 seasons in their career. We're drafting 52 players. So pretty soon you're going to be like, why on earth are they taking that guy? It's because there's not any seasons left. That's why.
The memory lane people loved the early picks. I know that going down memory lane. The people who love the minutia baseball are going to love the late picks as we come down the stretch. We do it right now here on the Kaufman Corner podcast.
You're listening to Kaufman Corner, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Royals, breaking down the Royals like no one else can. Kaufman Corner is hosted by Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro. Rany is a co-founder of Baseball Prospectus, author of Rany on the Royals, and former columnist for Grantland, The Ringer, and The Athletic. Soren is the award-winning afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. Kaufman Corner is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Now, here's your hosts, Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro.
Thank you, Curtis. Remember, if you're catching us via the podcast, we stream normally on Sunday nights at 10 p.m. If you want to be a part of the conversation, be a part of the chat with your fellow Kaufman Corner participants, you can do that. So we're coming to you, though, on a Monday with the holidays here on New Year's Day because we figure New Year's Eve, you're all out partying. So New Year's Day, here we come with the second half of our podcast.
Our listeners are heavy partiers. Right?
That's it. They like the party, right? Real quick, let's update everybody what you have on your roster right now, Rany. What are you going? You had the first pick.
Right.
We've gone through 13. We're halfway through our 26-man roster, and you have what on your roster?
So first pick, George Brett at third base, 1980. Then I took Brett Saberhagen, 1989, Kevin Appier, 1993. Followed it up with John Mayberry, 1975, to be my first baseman. Alex Gordon, 2011, in left field. Then Steve Busby, 1974. David Cone, 1994, giving me my 3 and 4 starters. Salvador Perez, 2021, behind the plate. Then first closer off the board, Wade Davis, 2014. Jose Offerman, 1998, to play second base. Bobby Witt, 2023, to be my shortstop. Jermaine Dye, 2000, to be right field. And then my designated hitter, even though he played right field during the year, Danny Tartable in 1991.
For me, I had the second pick after George Brett came off the board, so I'm going 2, 3, 6, 7, 10, 11, so forth. Zach Greinke in 2009, his Cy Young year. Darrell Porter in 79, an amazing season as a catcher, over 400 on base, 121 walks from behind the dish. He was my third pick. Mark Gubiza at number 6, Amos Otis at 7. At number 10, I tried to close out all the center fielders on Rany Jazayerli, so I went back-to-back. Carlos Beltran and Lorenzo Cain, 10 and 11. If you play center field, you can also play right and left. If you play right, you can play left. Lesser position, you can play. Lesser position players, left fielders can't play right. Right fielders can't play center. So keep that in mind with how we did things. Charlie Liebrandt in 1985. Dennis Leonard in 77. Jay Bell's great 1 year with the Royals at shortstop in 1997. Greg Holland to match the closer that Rany had taken in 2013. Kevin Seitzer's great rookie year in 1987. Mike Sweeney's 340 batting average in 2002 is my first baseman. And then with my last pick in the first half of the draft, Whit Merrifield's 2018, where he led the league in hits and stolen bases. That's the 26th pick. So here we sit. And what are you thinking? Let's go with me first, because I'm going to pick first. Or let's go with you, and then I'll tell you what I'm thinking, and then I'll make my pick. What are you thinking you need to get done right now with your team?
Okay. Well, obviously, I have a huge hole in center field. I mean, that's I have nothing out there. I got to mix and match, piece together something in center field. Beyond that, I need a fifth starter, but that's not a huge amount of urgency there. A couple of options on the board, and I want to fill out the bullpen. And then I do need Brett only played 117 games, so I'm going to need a third baseman who can play a fair amount there. But beyond that, it's just a matter of backing up all the positions. That turned out to be a more difficult task than I think maybe I thought going in, just because so many of the seasons are off the board that good players, good backups were just no longer available. So I'm very happy with my starting core, which is a good thing, because the bench is not the strongest part of my team.
And as we sit here, we talked about this in the last podcast. You took a lot of guys. George Brett, who's missing 45 games. David Cohn was a strike year. Mm-hmm. You need some extra,
some bulk. Yes.
Some bulk. I have a bunch of guys that have all played largely the whole year. I don't really need as much. And that's one of the things I looked at as it got late. I'm looking there and I'm like, well, that's great. I don't have to take anything. So I'm free to go anywhere I want. But it might have been better to have some of those shorter seasons that are, just sensational years, because there is still good talent out there, although it is beginning to dwindle. As we said, remember, when you take George Brett when Rany takes George Brett in 1980, I can't take anybody. He can't take anybody else from that 1980 season. And in the case of the center field position, Willie Wilson's best year was 1980. Mm-hmm. That's off the board. Rany can't take him. So these are the rules that we came up with just to make it a more difficult draft. Otherwise, it gets a little bit easier to just take the best guy here or there. So this makes it a little bit more difficult. So I need a DH. I need all my bench. I need a backup catcher. I'm happy, though. I'm like, hey, I am already telling you that my last pick is going to be a catcher. That's already in my head. I don't care what happens. I will find, because Darryl Porter's so good and so versatile and played a lot of games, that I feel pretty good. I'll get whatever the best catcher left is. But I'm thinking in terms of bullpen now, and I'm thinking in terms of bench, really is where my mindset is. And so I'm up. I've got the first pick now in the second half of it, and I'm going to go ahead and knock out the DH. I'm worried about that season, getting the best offensive season I can, and to me, it's Hal McRae in 1982. I also loved Hal McRae as a player, so there's a little bit of sentimentality, as there was for me in taking Zach Greinke and taking Mark Gubiza and taking Carlos Beltran. There Kevin Seitzer, Mike Sweeney, all favorites of mine. I was thrilled to have those guys on my team, and I'm thrilled to have Hal McRae. In 1982, Hal McRae was just outstanding. I think Hal McRae, is it possible, Rany, would you agree that maybe has become underrated in the history of the Royals, because he doesn't have the gaudy home run numbers, but what he did for those teams with the bat, 133 driven in that year, which was a bigger deal back then than now, but 308, 369 on base, 542, and 910 slug. He was fourth in the MVP voting that year. I don't think people realize just how great a hitter Hal McRae was.
Yeah, I wouldn't just say he's underrated in the annals of Royals history. In some ways, I think he's underrated now, certainly compared to the end of his career and early after his retirement in Major League history. Because let's not forget, when he retired, I mean, by pretty much universal acclamation, he was considered the best designated hitter of all time. The Royals acquired him in a trade from the Cincinnati Reds. This was before the Reds were the big red machine, but when they basically had so much talent they didn't know what to do with. And, the Royals had, an excellent general manager in Cedric Tallis, who basically said, this guy is, somebody that the Reds have no use for because he's not a good defender. We'll acquire him. And in 1973 was the first year of the designated hitter in the American League. he, played some right field, but was also used as a designated hitter heavily. And by 1976 was a full-time DH and one of the first true full-time DHs year in and year out in the American League, and was phenomenal for over a decade. And so, yeah, I mean, was considered, the best DH ever until basically Edgar Martinez moved over to that role in the mid-90s. And I do think his career has kind of been forgotten because he had high average. His value was in his average and his doubles more than his power or his on base. But a tremendous part of those playoff teams from 76 to 85.
Yeah. And so very happy to have Hal McRae join the squad. Great clubhouse guy. And if we got to light somebody up, I got the best, right? I got the best. Hand me the bottle of
if any of the sports writers are causing problems, asking too many questions, and you need somebody to whip a recorder at them, he's our man. So
yep, I'm all set. I'm ready to
all
rock.
right. Very good. So with my two picks now, so I do need a center fielder, but with my first pick, I could not resist taking a guy who I really think is kind of the linchpin of my strategy. And did not expect him to still be out there. And that is Dan Quisenberry in 1983. Okay. So first off, Dan Quisenberry obviously was a phenomenal pitcher, one of the most unique pitchers in Major League history. Side armor, submariner, really. Didn't throw hard at all, but, and was not hard to hit per se. I mean, he gave up over a hit in an inning in his career, but had as good a command as any pitcher ever, give up as few home runs basically relative to his league as any pitcher ever. 1,043 career innings, 2.76 ERA, but he was never better than 1983. He set the all-time Major League record for saves. He broke the saves record at the time by saving 45 games through 139 innings. He pitched in 69 games. He averaged over 2 innings an appearance. It was a different world, kids. He gave up only 118 hits, which is an excellent ratio, but on top of that, 11 walks, 2 of them intentional. He walked 9 guys unintentionally in 139 innings. Only gave up 6 home runs. Had a 1.94 ERA. Finished second in the Cy Young vote as a reliever. And was worth 5.5 wins. So in terms of quality, I mean, this is, again, there's a lot of innings here, which we don't necessarily need for our all-star teams. But in terms of just value, it's the most valuable season by a reliever in Royals history. But beyond that, I pointed out he's a submariner, right? He's a submarine pitcher. What do we know about submarine pitchers?
Durable.
They're durable, yes. They have big platoon splits. They're much easier to hit from the other side of the plate because you can see the ball coming in horizontally. So right-handed submariners, their Achilles heel has always been, well, they are a little bit more susceptible to left-handed hitters than right-handed hitters. Quisenberry is no exception. For his career, he gave up a 289 batting average to lefties. Now, not very little power, very few walks, but you hit 289, you're going to get some hit. You're going to get some runs. Mind you, he got tons of double plays. So sometimes even 3 singles wasn't enough to score a run because you get a double play in there and you still wouldn't score. But he gave up a lot of singles. Righties only hit 246 for his career. And in 1983 specifically, his best season, left-handers still hit 260 with a 275 on base, mind you. But right-handers, 198 batting average, 210 on base, 289 slug. In Major League history, among pitchers who faced at least 250 right-handed batters, that 210 on base allowed ranks 7th all time. Number 1 is Mark Eichhorn. You may remember his amazing 1986, another submariner. Like, there's 2 submariners. Kent Tekulve is also ahead of him on this list. He was death to right-handed hitters. Why does that matter? Well, when I started doing the research on this draft, the thing that really stood out to me on a big picture level is just how right-handed the Royals are in terms both of pitching and hitting. I mean, the pitching side, you have a lot of good left-handed pitcher seasons from left-handed starters, but the truly dominant ones, so the Greinke's, the Apiers, Saberhagens, Cohns, those were right-handed. But you look at the offense, there's a reason why. I mean, I took Brett, obviously, number 1, but there's a reason why I took Mayberry and Gordon when I did, even though it screwed me over in center field, because there aren't a lot of great left-handed hitters, especially once you get out of the outfield. Now let's take a look at your picks. All right, you started with Darryl Porter, and
listen, you're choosing to bring it up now. This is again I'm just taking the best players. I didn't realize that we were going to put together a lineup. All of a sudden, a couple days ago, like, what's your lineup? Like, I didn't know we were putting together.
Well, it's fun. This is a fun exercise anyway.
Yes.
This is definitely my Stratomatic history. This is where that comes in. I know you.
And this my rotisserie history, where right and left.
It doesn't matter, right? But I was thinking all along. I'm just looking at this. I'm like, you took Porter, okay, great, left-handed. Amos Otis is right-handed. Beltran's a switch hitter, okay. But then Lorenzo Cain, right-handed. Jay Bell, right-handed. Kevin Seitzer, right-handed. Mike Sweeney, right-handed. Whit Merrifield, right-handed. And then you just took Al McRae, right-handed. You got two guys in your lineup who are not right-handed, a lefty and a switchy, and 7 right-handed hitters. I got, and I'm just going to, Quisenberry's just going to come in and just get ground ball after ground ball. And he's not even my closer. I can use him in whatever role I want. I got Holland to close, Wade Davis to close. So 7th and 8th innings, when it's a 1-run game, you're going to have to get 3 singles with a bunch of right-handed hitters against Dan Quisenberry. So that part of, just from a team construction perspective,
right,
very happy to have him.
I will say this, though, like you lauded last podcast about the great bullpen of the Kansas City Royals. It was righty, 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 righty. It was all right-handers. Right? Talent tops the matchup. Matchups are what you go to when you don't have as much talent. I will say that.
Yeah, that's
you know, George Brett didn't sit against lefties, right? No, and you know, so I think that's something to keep in mind. But I would have, if we do this again next year, I will have a different approach.
Fair enough.
In fact, I wouldn't mind doing it next year. Maybe we'll do it quicker in just one podcast, but just to see how it differs, to see how the teams are different, and see if the 24 season throws anybody out there.
Exactly. Well, I mean, like I said, it changed the 2023 season shit, because I thought about this after last year's draft, and I remember thinking Jay Bell is going to be a very high pick, and he moved down because Bobby Witt emerged. Yes. But no, what you're saying is true, that talent trumps matchups, but when you can have both on your side, that's great. Speaking of which, I didn't even know this until I started doing research for the actual podcast after the draft. In Major League history, if you lower the limit to 125 batters faced right-handed, who has the best OPS against right-handed batters in Major League history? It's Wade Davis in 2014, who he gave up a 112 batting average, a 170 OBP, and a 128 slug. Basically, right-handed hitters against Wade Davis in 2014 hit like pitchers.
Yeah.
That wasn't why I took him when I did. I had no idea, but hey, every little bit helps. So,
all right.
Quisenberry was my first pick. Then I had to solve center field somehow. So I took Willie Wilson in 1984.
All right, we're going to really have to pick up the pace after that breakdown. I'm going to tell you that right now. We're proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving the greater Kansas City area. Nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Don't risk accidents and liabilities in your parking lot. Get your parking lot restriped today. A brightly striped lot cuts down on accidents, keeps you focused on your business. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com. That comes to me. And again, at this point, I'm like, okay, I don't really know how the computer baseball crap works. But Rany went with one of the big war relievers here. So we're going to have to look for the middle relief part of the equation. So I took Steve Farr in 1990. And I think this is one of the real hidden gems that are out there for a season, because people don't realize what Steve Farr did. Now, I can't use his starts. That's one of the other things that became an issue. Like,
well, he could start 6 times. He started 6 games. So
I don't need him to start. I've got more starts than I know what to do with when it's all said and done. But getting Steve Farr's 1990 season, a 198 ERA, 13-7 that year. He started 6 games. He finished 20 games. Right, only saved 1 through 127 innings. Struck out 94, only allowed 99 hits in 127 innings. So I get my long guy in Steve Farr, and you know, that was when Farr and Montgomery were kind of, you know, the two guys that were actually way better than Mark Davis, who stunk, who the Royals had signed after a Cy Young season. And it was like, okay, you know, why aren't they going with these guys? Because both those guys were absolutely outstanding. And I was a big fan. That was one of the years that I was out in right field GA a lot. And so partial to those guys, because I looked down in their bullpen when I'd be out there in the games. And then I said, okay, let's go Mike Aviles, because Mike Aviles quietly, that rookie year was absolutely one of the best in baseball. He was fourth in the rookie of the year voting, 325, 354, 480 for an 833 OPS, 121 OPS plus, 10 home runs, 27 driven in, and he plays short and he plays a lot of positions. That's one of the things that, okay, I maybe did right when it comes to the lineup flexibility part of the equation. Mike Aviles that year played 91 at short. He played 28 at second, so I can play him at second base. He also played 7 at third. But I've now covered all my short and second base. I don't have to take anybody else in the middle infield because I've got all the games I need, and I get by far the best season of Mike Aviles' career, and it was really a dynamic season. So I'm very happy that I've now solidified the middle infield. I don't have to take another middle infielder at any point.
Yeah, so Steve Farr 1990 is one of the reasons why I wanted to do this in the first place. It's like it's a completely forgotten season, kind of a forgotten player, I feel like, in Royals history. But was, like you said, 120 plus innings with an ERA under 2. Like, you don't see that very often. It's great that that he made one of our teams. I think he's a really good pick at that point. And Aviles, I mean, I don't think I appreciated at the time how much you screwed me over, because there are very few players left on the board who are good, who had multi-position eligibility in the infield, like who played both second and short. Like, the guy I would love to have found a way to get on my team is Bill Pecota, who had, good years, especially in 1990. Well, you just took Steve Farr from 1990. I can't take Bill Pecota's best years are off the board now. And I'm basically kind of stuck going forward. So I have to punt that part of my team. So Aviles is a really good pick. He's the one guy who can play multiple positions at a really, really good year. So with my next pick, at least according to my evaluations, there were plenty of good relievers available left, but only one dominant reliever season, and that's the one I took. That's Joaquin Soria in 2010, his fourth and best season with the Royals. Through 66 innings, 43 saves, a 178 ERA, a 253 FIP, just phenomenal. And he's going to be my third reliever. So not much more to say about it. Joaquin Soria was awesome. It was his last good year, but it was a really, really good year.
Yeah.
And then with pick 17, I need a fifth starter. And again, there are a fair number of good starters out there. There's a lot of depth there. But the one guy, in terms of his per inning performance, I think stood out from everyone else. And that's the guy who has the best ERA in Royals history. It's not Greinke and Saberhagen, who both had the 2.16 ERAs in their dominant years. It's Roger Nelson, who had a 2.08 ERA in 1972. Some trivia questions that way. Now, 1972, very low offense era. Is the year that and convinced the American League to bring in the DH because it was so low offense. But 208 is 208. His whip was .871. I know you love whip. .871 is absurd. He made only 19 starts. He actually made 15 relief appearances, so you'll probably pitch out of the bullpen for me for a month or two out of the season. But in 19 starts alone, he threw 152 innings. He averaged 8 innings a start, and he had a 2.08 ERA and a whip well under 1. So, he's my fifth starter. He's phenomenal. And I feel like I still need I think like a dozen starts from a sixth starter, which I'll get later. But I'm very, very happy with the way my rotation closes out now.
Okay. And for me, I am thrilled to get the other half of Steve Farr's running mate, and that is Jeff Montgomery. I mentioned how much I enjoyed those two guys and how they really kind of came from nowhere. They weren't highly thought of, where Mark Davis was this tremendous flop for the Kansas City Royals, and Steve Farr and Jeff Montgomery were all-star caliber relievers for the Royals. So I'm taking him in 1992, and Jeff Montgomery, there was a time he was called Thrill a Minute Monty, because he wasn't the guy that went and blew people away. The next year, he would lead the league in saves with 45. But in this year, he had a 2.18 ERA, 82 innings, saved 39 games, had 69 strikeouts against 27 walks, a whip of 1.065, so not a lot of base runners. He was an all-star. And I feel like I've got the equal. I'm fine with, I know statistically, Joaquin Soria grades higher. But as far as real baseball, I'll take Jeff Montgomery up on the mound. I also get a guy, first time I did rotisserie baseball was 1990. I won the league that year on the back of Scott Erickson. But in 1992, I came back and won my second championship. And Jeff Montgomery, I had Montgomery and Eckersley at the back of my bullpen because people didn't give a lot of credit to Jeff Montgomery that year. He had 33 saves the year before, but people still didn't think much of the Royals at that point. And I got Jeff Montgomery super cheap. And so I always remember Monty being part of my championships. So I'm very happy to have Jeff Montgomery in my bullpen. And I feel really good that now, again, I can go anywhere I want because I've got my middle infield covered. I got a lot of people, I think, on the corners that are there, and my bullpen now is looking pretty strong. So I like what I've got in that part. And or I should add it. I guess I forgot. And I take Mark Littell, who has one of the best seasons that a Royals reliever's ever had, but it's buried because in 1976, after he gave up just one home run all year, he gave up a home run in the playoffs. And so it really sours what was
a home run that ended the playoffs.
It was really the first Mark Davis season, right? He had not necessarily in the close. He did close and get 16 saves, but he had a dominant. Think back then when the strikeout wasn't as important, guys. The home run wasn't important, so they wouldn't give up the strikeout. Nobody wanted to strike out, so just even putting the ball in play was considered a success by hitters. So they did anything they could, choking up on the bat, doing everything. 104 innings. 92 strikeouts. He did walk 60, which was his thing, but he was somewhat effectively wild. As we said, only one home run allowed, 2.08 ERA. So with Littell, with Jeff Montgomery, with what I've done already, I love my bullpen right now. And I think I'm in really good shape and I can go wherever I want now here moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I'll point out about Montgomery, I mean, this was at best his third best season. I mean, yes. Some of these guys are getting screwed over just because we're eliminating seasons. So, like, if a guy's getting picked later than you would expect, it's not a diss on the player. It's the fact that one of his seasons is, his best season's not available. There's at least one member of the Royals Hall of Fame that didn't get picked at all, which we can talk about later. But it's the rules are, brutal for a reason. So, both of those, very good picks. They were very high on my list. Okay, so I have to close my center field hole. I took Willie Wilson earlier. Again, it was his like fifth or sixth best season, 1984. He hit 301 that year.
He didn't have that many games, as I recall. You're against
128 games too. I mean, he was a full-time center fielder, which was important. He played every game in center field. Stole 47 bases and only got caught 5 times, but 301 average and just a 350 on base, 390 slug. Like he's the incredibly fast jitterbug, perfect number 9 hitter. Like again, when the rest of my team is great, I'm perfectly fine. He'll bat 9th because if he gets on base, you're in trouble because then the lineup turns over. He's got tremendous speed, but certainly not as good as your 3-headed center field outfield. So, but I need somebody to fill in the other side of that. The other thing is Willie hits lefties better than righties, so he's going to be useful in that sense. But I need somebody who can hit right-handers and play center field. And really, there's one option left. That's David DeJesus. His 2005 season, coming in the midst of one of the Royals' worst stretches, but he was not his fault. He hit 293 with a 359 on base, a 445 slugging. This was his second season in the majors. He was still a good defensive center fielder. Later on in his career, he'd moved to the corners and play more right field and stuff, but he was still a good center fielder. He's left-handed, so he complements Willie well. Willie will play more against lefties. DeJesus will fill in. He's my fourth outfielder. He's going to play right field when Jermaine Dye needs a day off, and play left when Alex Gordon needs a day off. Again, not proud of my center field situation, but this combination of Willie Wilson, David DeJesus, that'll work well.
But I will point out, David, like I think this is the one thing that I saw is like you're not in as bad a shape as I thought I could put you in because David DeJesus is a really good player.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
very underrated.
And if I didn't take him here, like it was getting bleak out there. So I
was going to take him if you did not.
Yeah.
In fact, I thought about taking him last go round, but I felt like okay, if I knock out my bullpen, then I'm pretty good shape to go wherever I want to go.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, the next guy on the list might have been like, I mean, I might have considered Gerard Dyson at some point, but I think even his best.
I did too. Yeah.
So I'm glad I got him where I did. And then with my second pick, I need a backup catcher. Like I said, Salvi's going to miss 30 games. He has to DH or whatever. And you talk about your favorite players. Mike McFarland was always one of my favorite guys. Growing up, he was there when I was, a teenager. And it's not his best season, but his 1996 season, he had 274, 19 home runs in just 112 games, slugged 499. Great clubhouse guy. Everyone, loves the guy, leader behind the plate, all of that. Good defensive player, throughout 39% of base runners that year. And again, as a backup guy who's going to play 40 games in the season, The backup catchers were a little slim, and I know you took one with the last pick, but I was very happy to get McFarland with this pick.
And I would have, and McFarland would have been my ideal situation for him to fall all the way to me, because I'm a big Mike McFarland fan as well. Great guy, by the way, and I think a very good player. And I was looking at DeJesus because I knew that's where you had to go. So there are a couple of times I thought about taking DeJesus and just trying to make your outfield situation even more dire. And really looking back on it, if I had it to do over again, because he was left-handed, correct? If I had it to do over again, I would have taken him, knowing, the right, left, like, oh, I'm going to have to put a batting order together. Like, I wasn't thinking in terms of that while I was doing this. If we do this again, I'll keep the left-handed part of the equation there. And I should have taken him somewhere along the way. And so, but I'm okay. I'm like, fine. Okay. I didn't need a center fielder and catcher. I'm fine with whoever I get at the back end. So this is actually good news for me. So I'm thrilled to take Johnny Damon in 1999 right here, because he's by far the best WAR player on the board. A couple wins better than everybody out there. And so he can play left field. It allows me to, do whatever I don't know how it's going to work with the computer. I don't know if I don't get to submit a lineup, but and in this case, the left-handed bat is certainly sorely needed. So as I look at putting together a lineup, Johnny Damon will be a part of it. And so I'm thrilled to get Johnny Damon there, because I'm also a big fan of Johnny Damon. Great guy as well. I always enjoyed my conversations with him. Underrated, dry sense of humor for Johnny Damon there. So I'm thrilled to get Johnny Damon. And then I'm going to take a guy that I don't, how many people do you think that are tried and true hardcore Royals fans know the name Bob Johnson?
Not a lot. I mean, I know the name, but I don't know much more. And I
didn't know the name before this. Did you know Bob Johnson before this?
I've seen the name of him, and there's some, good players from the very early Royals. Dick Drago, I think is, they're who come from that era that I know the names, but they weren't there when the Royals were actually in the playoffs 5 years later, and they get forgotten. And this is a good opportunity. The biggest thing to remember about Bob Johnson is, after this one season, he gets traded because Cedric Tallis was a magician as a GM, and sold high on this guy. They got him, the 1 year earlier. They traded. They got it. Well, for one thing, they got him with Amos Otis, like the best trade in Royals history. They got him for Joe Foy. They got him, and then he has a really good year as a rookie starter, which you'll talk about. And then they trade him for Freddie Patek.
Well, you're stealing my thunder. So his place in history is tremendous, because he comes over in a great trade, that is iconic in building the Royals into being a championship contending ball club. And then in addition to that, he gets traded away and brings in, more of that club in Freddie Patek. But in his 1 year with the Royals, I think this is amazing. He broke in and had 1 2/3 innings with the Mets in 1969 at age 26. So I did want to highlight, how about that? Like, who is this guy? He's going to be 27. What are you getting out of this guy? What can he possibly do for the Kansas City Royals? Well, what he ended up doing was going 8-13 with a 3.07 ERA in 214 innings, 26 starts, 14 relief appearances. 26 starts. He throws 214 innings, only allows 178 hits, strikes out 206. I also love that he led the league in hit batters. So, he'll put a little fear in you. But he had some nasty stuff to strike out 206 in those days. In 214. I'm thrilled to get him. He's my fifth starter, or really at this time, because we hadn't really clarified the rules, I'm thinking I'm going to make him a reliever. So I've got a big power strikeout reliever. We talked about, well, no, I only get to use him for the innings in relief or the starts. I need the starts at this point. Later on, I probably will just go ahead and use him for the dominant reliever innings. I think he was actually better as a starter than a reliever. But however you want to look at it, fifth starter or as a reliever, and I think if it were the real world, I could pitch him in relief as my long guy. And I love it. And I love the fact that I got to learn about Bob Johnson, because I'd never even heard of this guy. And what an interesting little nugget in the history of Royals baseball.
Yeah, no, I knew his name primarily because I did a series, I don't know, 5-6 years ago for The Athletic, where I basically ranked the greatest trades in Royals history. And it was a really fun research. Kurt Nelson helped with that a lot as well, for the director of the Royals Hall of Fame, to just, learn some of those hidden nugget trades. I mean, some of these are not so much hidden. I think everyone should know the Amos Otis trade is maybe the greatest. I ranked it as the number 1 trade in Royals history. The Zach Greinke trade, number 2. That brought in LCD Escobar to Lorenzo Cain. But Amos Otis, you trade a guy whose career basically never took off after the 1 year he had with the Royals and Joe Foy for a borderline Hall of Famer. Amos Otis is not a real Hall of Famer, but just one step below, who played basically his entire productive career with Kansas City. And they also got this guy in the same trade and then turned him around a year later, get one great year out of him, turn him into Freddie Patek. Again, Cedric Tallis is the guy who deserves to be in the Royals Hall of Fame. He was the Royals' first general manager and was just the architect of a team that went to the playoffs in its 8th year as an expansion team when every other expansion team of that era was still losing like 100 games. So, Bob Johnson's a really good pick. This is why we're doing this. Okay, so now I got 2 picks, and with my first one, I think a guy if you're listening, this might surprise people. Again, we are getting to the lower. The lower quality seasons the pickings are slim, but I actually really like this pick. It's Mike Minor, 2017. Why Mike Minor? It's a good season. Maybe not great, but a good season. He had a 2.55 ERA, I believe. Let me find his numbers here. Yes, 2.55 ERA, 78 innings, 57 hits, 22 walks, 88 strikeouts. The big thing is he's left-handed. My entire rotation is right-handed. I have no left-handed pitchers on the roster right now. And I don't have a huge pressing need because you don't have a lot of left-handed bats for me to try and get out. But if Darryl Porter's up there in a key situation, Mike Minor probably had the best season by a left-handed reliever in Royals history. And throw one quick stat at you here. In the history of the Royals, the lowest OPS by a left-handed pitcher with 70 or more innings in a season. The second lowest in Royals history is Mike Minor. You want to guess who's number 1? I'll give you a hint. He pitched in 2023.
Who am I?
And he's not a reliever.
Lefty in 2023.
Left-handed, not a reliever. Who just had the best season by
Cole Ragans.
Cole Ragans is number 1. Just a little New Year's excitement for us for the upcoming year. That's how good Cole Ragans was. Best season by OPS by any lefty with 70 or more innings. But Mike Minor was number 2. So he may just be my Darryl Porter facer in the late innings, but that's fine. I need a tactical advantage. So he was my first pick. And then with my second pick, this is where there are no backup infielders that can play multiple positions. I basically had to fill them in one step at a time. So I take Frank White in 1986. Frank White, this is not a reflection of his career. Again, he just had good season after good season, but he didn't have one dominant year that would have made us take him sooner. But 1986, this is late in his career, but he developed power. He had 22 home runs that year, was on the All-Star team at 272, slugged 465, and was still an elite Gold Glove defensive second baseman. He won his 7th Gold Glove that year. He would win his 8th the following year. And in fact, he'll probably platoon if we were, putting this together against a lefty. I might start him over Jose Offerman. But if not, then he's my defensive replacement for sure. So I can bring in when Quisenberry comes in out of the bullpen and I'm getting ground balls, Frank White's coming with him.
Okay. I'm up now for a couple, and I'm looking at it going, okay, I love my all-around ability to hit the baseball, but I don't really have pure thump. When I went with all the center fielders, I've got a lot of 20-something home run guys. You've got the 30-something home run guys. And so I'm like, okay, for the bench, I need to go ahead and hit the ball over the wall. And again, I've already acknowledged I made the mistake of probably not valuing left-handed left and right. I'm just thinking about like the overall best seasons. So I wanted to go pop here. I've been eyeing these guys for a little bit, and I'm happy that Gary Gaetti is available because he finishes off my third and first base. He played enough games at first base that he counts at first and third. And because he played more at third, I can count all those games over at first base. So to finish off the games that Mike Sweeney didn't play, I now have Gary Gaetti in the mix, and I take Jorge Soler. These 2 seasons for these two, Gary Gaetti in 1995, you recall, was one of what was just at that time a handful of 30 home run seasons in the history of Royals baseball. He had 35 home runs that year, 261, 329, 518 slug. He was 10th in the MVP voting and won the Silver Slugger Award that year. So
Remember the season that was a strike affected season. It was 18 games shorter than normal. He probably would have broken Steve Alboni's home run record up for the team, which was 36, if he had had another 18 games to play.
Yeah, he was tremendous that year. And so 35 home runs, 27 doubles. I'm thrilled to have him. He finishes off my corners. And then if I want some DH time for Jorge Soler, I just need a big home run off the bench. I really, frankly, didn't know how. I'm like, well, let's just get some power in. Don't know how this is all going to fit into the computer. But 48 home runs, a franchise record, still the franchise record, tied now with Salvador Perez that year, 264, 354, 569. Don't want him ever out by the outfield. Don't have to have him out by the outfield, but happy to just take some pop off the, put some pop on the bench and continue to fill out my bench overall. So that's 42 and 43 for me.
Okay. And, as soon as you took Gaetti and I looked into I realized I got screwed a little bit here because I didn't realize he could also play first base. He played 11 games there. And because I've mentioned I need a third baseman to cover George Brett for a little bit, but I also need a backup first baseman. And there aren't a lot of guys, that can actually play 10 games or more at both positions. George Brett's not on the board. He did it. Kevin Seitzer's not on the board. He did it. Gaetti would have been that guy. And
I think Gaetti in a real world where guys really do get hurt and we don't know exactly how many games they're going to play, I think Gary Gaetti would have been more valuable in that world. Having a corner guy that can play both, if we say, okay, he can play first or third and have that kind of pop, he would have gone before this, right? Like that I think we can agree on that. Like Jay Bell is overrated by this process and Gary Gaetti is underrated.
Right. The rules are the rules. We're having fun with it.
No. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying that's one of the things that I look back on and notice came about in this.
Sure. And the player I took, is the guy I kind of had my eye on as the backup to George Brett. It's the guy George Brett replaced at third base, but he doesn't have the first base eligibility. And that's Paul Shaw, 1971, who, but again, this is before George Brett's time, but he had 274 that year, but 103 walks and a 387 on base. This is a tremendous on base guy. He's right-handed, so he fits well with Brett when he has to fill in for Brett at third base. 31 doubles, 6 triples, 11 homers. So modest power, but the on base is great. Was not a great defensive third baseman, but again, he's the backup. I like having the on base off the bench, but he's not starting for me if I don't need him to. And he is limited to third base. So Gaetti, for that reason alone, would have been a better fit for me. And then with my next pick, again, I have a backup second baseman, but I don't have a backup shortstop. I would have taken Freddie Patek, except that Freddie Patek's best year was the year I just took Paul Shaw from. So Freddie Patek's best years were off the board. So I took Alcides Escobar in 2012, which was his best season. He had 293, 35 stolen bases, 721 on OPS, and 96 OPS plus, which was his best of his career. Never a great hitter, but a decent hitter that year. Good runner, good defender. He's a backup. Bobby Witt doesn't need a lot of days off, but when he does, I have Alcides Escobar in to fill in.
Okay. We're proudly brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete with free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. Every project, you get a written warranty. Gann Asphalt keeps parking lot problems out of your, out of your hair, frankly. They've been doing it since 1994. Keep your parking lot safer. Keep your focus on your business. Avoid unnecessary delays, costly expenses, and liability with a brightly striped parking lot, and make a great first impression with a smooth parking lot. All things parking lot, that's one contractor. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. They're online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. All right, back to me now, and that puts me looking at, like, right now, I'm like, okay, who's going to play where? I at this point, I realized I don't need anything. And so this is the first time that I did kind of think, oh, okay, well, maybe I want to get a left-hander. I'm also thinking you still need a starting pitcher. So I'm like, well, the top two guys are Brady Singer and Gil Mesh. Mm-hmm. I could pop for both those guys. But instead, I went with Brady Singer and Danny Duffy. One, because I love Danny Duffy. He's one of my favorite Royals of all time. Brady Singer, just if you look at it, the strikeouts per nine, he's more the modern style pitcher. His 2022 was a very good season. And I keep him away from you. I don't need the innings. So I'm like, well, let me take something Rany still needs a starting pitcher. So give me Brady Singer and give me Danny Duffy because I did for the first time go, it'd be fun to have a lefty. I'm not thinking it really matters at that time, and I get a guy I love. So 2016 Danny Duffy. And you and I both had Danny Duffy on our all-time Royals team as where we could basically, we both just cheated.
Right.
And said,
there was no competitive aspect to that. So we didn't care about the rules, and we both just said, you know what, a team with Danny Duffy in the bullpen is going to be a better team.
Yeah, it's going to be lights out. In 2016, Danny Duffy started 26 games, 16 games in relief, was 12-3 with a 351, 179 innings, 188 Ks, 9.4 Ks per nine. It was his most dominant season, and I believe that's the one that got him the contract, right?
I think you're right. And he also had the single greatest start in Royals history that year. 8 innings, 1 hit, no walks, 16 strikeouts. Prime Danny Duffy was as good as any pitcher we've seen.
And now looking back on it, it was one of the most important selections I made. I don't get that many relief innings, but I would say that if I could pitch him more, I would have a dominant left-hander to go against you. And so I'm very happy to have Brady Singer and Danny Duffy. Singer to keep away from you, Duffy because I get the left-hander and he's got versatility there. I'm thinking with him and Johnson, I have a great right-left out of the bullpen if I were able to use them however I wanted.
Yeah, well, and again, these rules we're having fun with it, but they're guidelines. If somebody's putting, and we'll throw a pitch out there. If anybody does want to simulate these teams against each other in a baseball simulator out of the park or Stratomatic or any other system, by all means, send us a message on Twitter or any way else, and let us know what the results are. I'd love to find out who actually has the better team. But these are guidelines. I'm perfectly fine using, just like I might use Roger Nelson out of the bullpen as a swingman. You got Bob Johnson, Danny Duffy. It's perfectly reasonable. And you did. I mean, you screwed me a little. I was going to take Brady Singer, so you definitely knew what I was going to do next. And when he was gone, I settled for Gilmesh. And Gilmesh in 2007, still a very good year. I only need about 13 starts or so he's not going to pitch for me that much anyway. But this is the first season of Gilmesh as a Royal, and he was a revelation. It was a gamble that Dayton Moore took, and 216 innings at 3.67 ERA in 2007, still high offense era. A really good year. He made every start. 62 walks, 156 strikeouts. Just he made the All-Star team. I mean, it's just a very good, solid season. I mean, we're running out of seasons here, so I'm very happy to have Gilmesh there. We're down to I think 8 seasons left. And then with my
it should be pointed out, we're drafting 52 players, and there were 55 seasons of Royals baseball. So somebody from almost every team is getting.
There's going to be 3 seasons left out. We'll talk about those 3 seasons when we're done here. I think it's actually kind of illuminating. So 2007 Gilmesh was my first pick. My second pick, I still kind of need a backup first baseman. Jim Mayberry can play almost every day, but he has to DH at least 20 or 30 times, which is perfectly fine because Danny Tartabull has to miss some games anyway. So they're about 30 times a year. Tartabull will be out. Mayberry can slide over to DH. So I needed a first baseman. In 1969, Royals' inaugural year, Mike Fiore played in 107 games, and all you need to know is he had a 420 OBP. If you want to know what I value in building a lineup, what did Brad Pitt say in Moneyball? He gets on base. Yeah. Mike Fiore, he gets on base. Only hit 274, but 84 walks in 107 games. 420 on base. He had 12 home runs, so he also slugged 428. Mostly a first baseman. He actually dabbled a little in the outfield, but for me, he'll be my backup first baseman. It was his one good year in the major leagues, but at this point in the draft, that's all I need.
So back over to me, and now I'm thinking, okay, I literally don't need anything. Right. That's where we're at right now. And that is one of the flaws, in my opinion, in doing this is no one's going to play. Right. I need a backup catcher, but I've already decided I'll find my backup catcher. That was going to be my last pick no matter what. So where to go on this? And I really did kick around a lot of things. I kicked around Gerard Dyson, you mentioned, just to take another really good defensive center fielder. That was somebody that I was thinking about taking. I'm like, do I want a middle infielder? Mark Grudzielanek had a really good season. That was still sitting out there. Was a possibility to take somebody. I love Joe Randa as a player. I was thinking about going after him. Do I take Kelvin Herrera I think Kelvin Herrera's season maybe it had gone off the board. I know Raul Ibanez was
I
out
think
there.
it had. No, I think
Had it come off. I know because I kept thinking about Kelvin Herrera as time went on. And finally I thought, no, let's just go with the depth of starting pitching. In the real world, you can never have too much starting pitching. So I took 1981 Larry Gura, by the way, giving me a left-hander. And now looking back at it, like he probably goes into my rotation against all your lefties. Because when we have to put that together, not his best season. His best season was in 1980 when he threw 283 innings. This year, though, he throws 172 innings with a 2.72 ERA. Not a big strikeout guy. He was a man of the times. 172 innings, 61 Ks. Like pitch to contact.
That was baseball. That was baseball in the early 80s.
But think about he was ninth in the Cy Young vote.
Well, think about 170 innings in a year that was 2/3 of a season because they missed 50 games. 170 is actually, we're happy with 170 innings from a full season today. So that was also a sign of the times.
So the goal for Jordan Lyles was what
180. I think he got to 175 and thrilled. He got there and he missed 8 weeks. So
So 11-8 with a 272 in a strike shortened year, and he threw 172 innings. So I'm very happy. And now the way it works out, it was a very necessary pick because he'll be in my rotation in all likelihood. Oh, and then I have one more. I take my catcher, which had been done forever. That's why I almost forgot it. I've been done. Fran Healy is the best catcher on the board, and he had kind of a. This was fun to see the season that Fran Healy had. What year did I have him in?
1973.
1973, Fran Healy. Think about this for the Royals that year: 276, 348 on base percentage from your catcher, 409, 6 home runs, 15 doubles. He played in 95 games, so really slim pickings now. But I still get a guy that I think WAR-wise was like over 2. When it was all said and done. So I still get a very productive catcher at the very end because I knew you weren't going to carry 3 catchers. And if you did, well, fine. But he had 2.7 WAR in 1973. So
he was. I mean, it was McFarland or Healy were the 2 guys that were left on the board there, and there was nobody else from that season that you had to worry about me stealing him from you for. And then so my very last pick,
Mr. Irrelevant,
and getting people out. We have 4 seasons to pick from. And what I thought was always challenging was, okay, we're only going to have 3 seasons left, and there are 3 shortened seasons, 2 strike shortened, 1 pandemic shortened seasons. So I thought, well, gee, we're going to probably take from all the other ones. Well, actually, no. David Cohen, we took early, even though that was a strike shortened year. You just took Larry Gura. And so now I got a choice between, there are 3 full seasons left. And I looked at all 3 of those seasons, and we'll talk about what seasons those are pretty soon. And I mean, there was just literally I just wanted just another. I had 5 relievers. I'm like, you know what? Even though my starters are going to throw 7 to 8 innings every time out, let me just pick up some decent innings. There's nothing out there on those 3 seasons. So I looked at 2020, strikes, pandemic shortened year, just 60 games, and there it was. And I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna bring this guy up like mid-August, and he's gonna throw out of my bullpen for 6 innings. But I took Jesse Hahn, who in 2020 threw 17 1/3 innings for the Kansas City Royals. But you know what? He gave up 1 run and, more impressively, 4 hits in 17 1/3 innings. That is the lowest hits per 9 innings in Major League history for anyone who threw at least 15 innings. So 17 innings, he walked 8 guys, fine. He struck out 19, no home runs, the 0.52 ERA again. But 4 hits in 17 innings, okay. He's not going to be available very much. But as we'll talk about, you saw what my other options were from the other seasons. I'll take 17 good innings over pretty much anything that was left over from those other Royals teams. So that's my 26-man roster.
All right, so there it is. We've now completed our draft, and then what's the 3 seasons that are left over, people should know are
2003, which is interesting. We'll talk about that. 2003, 2004, and 2006. And if there's a better way of describing just how hopeless the Royals were, if there's a better way of explaining why Dayton Moore got the job in 2006 to take over this team and overhaul it, now you know. I mean, 2003 was the good year, the 83 win season, the season the Royals led the division, and they did have good players. We took other seasons, Mike Sweeney, Carlos Beltran specifically. They also had a player that the best season, I think by far, of a player that we both chose not to take, that was Darryl May. in 2003. I think he had almost 6 WAR. Now, I was avoiding left-handed starters once I saw how right-handed your lineup tilt. That's why, like you took Larry Gura. I considered him, but I decided not to because I didn't want a lefty. Paul Splittorff, holds the franchise record for wins overall. There's not a knock against him at all that he wasn't taken. He had many good seasons, a few great ones, but I just ultimately didn't want a left-handed starter on my team. But Darryl May, I think we both agree that, I don't care what the numbers were. It was a fluky year. That 2003 season as a whole was just such a massive fluke. I don't think either one of us had any desire to put Darryl May into our rotation.
No.
And then 2004 and 2006 were just hopeless season. There's just no talent anywhere. I broke that streak because I had to take David DeJesus in 2005. I guess credit to him for having a year in the midst of all that was worth drafting. But man, what a hopeless time to be a Royals fan that was.
Yeah. By the way, the season, the best in 2006, Mark Teahen, I did consider. That was his 300 at bat. And, if I had it to do over again, I would take him. Right, I would have taken him somewhere. I probably would have taken Gura earlier. I mean, I needed more left-handed bats, and so there was a real reason for me to take him.
I think I wasn't looking at him because I had the left-handed bat at third, and so yes. But Teahen was a good choice.
I should have taken. I needed another left-handed starter. I should have been more lefty conscious. And Mark Teahen, if we do this again, I think will make a roster because David DeJesus, his better year is a different year. But David DeJesus is not available. But by WAR, it was Teahen, Grudzielanek, DeJesus, Mankiewicz, Neil Brown in 2006. And so Mark Teahen's 2006 season is the highest WAR season that we did not take. He had a 3.7 WAR that year. And so I think that is of note. And frankly, Mark Teahen, and I wish I could go back and do it and add him to the mix because I would love to have Mark Teahen on my team. Another one of my favorite Royals. So I'm kicking myself that I don't have Mark Teahen. I don't mind Larry Gura, and I need Larry Gura. And again, I'd do this differently if I had it to do over again. But having Mark Teahen to go up against your righties in that year, and that was the year he was turning on the ball and hitting some home runs. It was by far his best season. I would like to have had Mark Teahen there. You're right about the 03 season, and I don't even know who was that. 04 looks like the worst one of the bunch, right?
Oh, yeah. 04, God. I mean, on Baroa, that would be 203. That was the other thing. 03, you could have taken on Baroa, but again, I don't think either one of us really believed in him. And his defense was never that good.
The best player in 04 was Zach Greinke.
Oh, okay. And then as a rookie, mind you, who came up mid-season.
Second was Joe Randa.
Okay.
With a 2.7. Third was Carlos Beltran with a 2.3.
Who was traded mid-year.
And that's it. That's it.
Yep.
That's all that made my list of even draftable, right? And so Greinke wasn't available, and I think that was the Beltran season that he was hurt, right?
No, that was Beltran who was traded mid-year. That's what I'm saying. He was traded in June. He still was the third best player on the team.
Yeah.
So 7 guys on the entire roster got 1 WAR. Do you know how hard it is to have only 7 1-WAR seasons on your roster? It was. Again, this is a very interesting reflection of just how, look, things looked bad in 2023. And yes, they tied the all-time record for losses in the season set by the 2006 Royals. But in terms of talent, Bobby Witt alone makes, the 2023 Royals a less hopeless situation than 2006. And, not counting Cole Reagans and other guys.
Can we, can we take a moment to acknowledge 2005 though? In the midst of this, because it's 03, 04, and 06.
Yeah. Well, that was the year I had to take DeJesus, but
took DeJesus. But do you know how many and I went down? I basically took everybody who accumulated a WAR of 2 or better. Was my list. I'm this should be enough players to get me there, and it was. But there was only one other guy on the 05 Royals that had a WAR,
and he's a guy if I hadn't taken DeJesus from this year, I told you about Mike Minor and how I wanted a lefty reliever, but Andy Cisco, Rule 5 pick Andy Cisco, who before he work ethiced himself out of the major leagues, had a really promising season as a rookie reliever, Rule 5 pick, and was left-handed. I considered him, but that's it.
But that is, you are right. And I think what happened there, we don't need to go around the unbelievably the shackling of a baseball organization that the Glass family did in their ownership was really coming to fruition. And I know from talking to guys in the organization at that time, this is in a stretch where they spent $20,000 over like a decade in Latin America. 20,000. They just abandoned Latin America as a talent process. The draft that produced Mike Aviles, they had 5 real draft picks. Shane Costa was one of them. It was Mitch Meyer was one of them. He was the second one. Who was the first that year? It was
was that Colt Griffin that year?
No, it's the outfielder they compared to Mark Kotze.
Chris Labansky.
The Chris Labansky draft.
5
picks, and I think Shane Costa. It went like Mitch Meyer was second, Costa was third. I can't remember who was fourth and fifth. They actually got Mike Aviles to the big side.
But that was at the $1,000 bonus.
45 college seniors at $1,000 take it or leave it offers. That's what that draft was. That is what happens when ownership says we're not going to spend. Is you get that, and I think it just screams at us how bad the talent was, and that's what happens when you just abandon actually trying to find young talent.
Just abandon trying to spend money on to invest in your team. And if nothing else, Dayton Moore not, basically giving an ultimatum. If you want me to take this job, you have to spend money, and getting the Glasses to honor that and change the trajectory of this franchise. He deserves, all the credit in the world for that specifically. So let's kind of compare. It's interesting to compare our teams because we both have our strengths and weaknesses. I mean, you have your strength. I see completely concede. Your defense is better, especially your outfield defense dramatically better. Your outfield in general, but especially center field. You don't have a hole the way I have a hole in center field. And it's ironic. You have a much better bench because you between Aviles and Gaidi, you have a lot of flexibility, but you don't need the bench because all of your starters are, played 150 games or whatever.
Which again, though, real baseball, I'm penalized because we're not playing real baseball. It's a computer that's going to suck up these games based upon the games that were based on our rules. And so in real baseball, though, I do like how my team shapes up. Right,
it might be a better team on the field. On certainly based on, I feel like based on what we're doing, I have the weakness. Like my bench isn't very good. I have the center field issue, but the heart of my lineup, I just feel like that again, having that Brett, Mayberry, Tartable, and then even Dye and Gordon. The heart of my lineup, I think. I said I'm not focusing on defense. I'm just going to, take and rake. I'm just going to bludgeon my way to victory. It's a contrast of styles. And then I figure my pitching staff is so good that I don't have to rely on my defense as much because my pitchers are going to get a lot of strikeouts anyway. That was kind of my strategy. I'm very curious to see what.
I'll say this: I would, if we do this again next year, I want to tweak the rules because I don't like the idea. I don't see the purpose in drafting a team to beat one team. Baseball.
This is also the thing. I think it's like trying to. I don't have to outrun the bear. I just have to outrun you because the bear will eat you if I get away. I built my team to beat you, and so knowing what was available.
I would like them to run the simulation if possible. To run the simulation head to head, where I guess they're going to play 162 games head to head, but also run it against a season. Just drop it.
That's a good drop it into the 2023 American League and replace the real Royals with our teams. And I mean, obviously these are going to be great. I would imagine these teams should win 120 games. God, I would hope so. But yeah, maybe find out, or maybe run it against every World Series champion of the last 20 years. Create a league. I mean, you can do all sorts of things with simulators. I would be curious to know. That might be a fair because, like you said, you didn't build your team specifically to beat mine. So I would be curious to see in a level playing field also. So anybody who's got the time to do both, please let us know. I'd be very curious to know how that
Reach out to us, Soren Petro at 810WHB.com if you want to send me an email about it. You can hit us up on the Twitter. Randy's probably better at answering you. Do you have open DMs? I don't even know if I do.
I don't have open DMs, but if you send me if you send a message direct to me, I will see it and I'll respond.
Okay. I might not. I get a lot of messages, so I might not. So probably better to reach out to Rany on this one. Anything else that you took away from this? I mean, I do love what we saw about what seasons ended up being left over. all the process. Any other takeaway from all this?
It was fun. Like I said, it was to me, the fun is in the journey here and just learning about these players and trying to figure out, what player from 1970 am I going to take, and how am I going to account for the fact that I can't get Willie Wilson's 1980 season, and how to compensate for that. But like learning about, Bob Johnson and the Mike Fiore pick. You took Fran Healy, and I'm like, I knew very little about this player, but he was on my list.
And my knowledge of Royals baseball grew immensely.
Yeah, it was that was my goal with this, and I feel like I achieved that, so I was happy with that.
Yeah, I do want to do it again, right? With knowing, like, as we kind of meandered our way to the rules, knowing we would have a better idea. I'd like to do it again next year. It'll be interesting to see if anyone from 24 pops into that mix and see. I don't think it's something we can do every single year because I think you will settle into a rut at the top, and it'll tweak a little bit. But I think we could run it back one more time next year. Probably do one podcast with it and see how it differs and compare and contrast.
Ren, you haven't even lost it, and you're already asking for a rematch. Like, let's find out. If you win, you're not going to want that.
No, I just want to do it. I would be entertained to do it again, thinking a different way.
Yeah, and I think maybe we tweak the rules every year. We obviously, as we've learned, we need to be clear about the rules ahead of time.
Right.
But maybe we tweak them each year and add a simple wrinkle. I mean, the simple wrinkle of not being able to take from that same season again changes everything.
Yes.
And I think makes it much more interesting because otherwise you're just taking all the best players from the best seasons in Royals history, and it's fine, but it's not as fun.
One of the things I might do is only allow the games played at the top position played. Force you to have bench guys. In other words, like that Damon season would be greatly neutered because it's like 69 and 67 or whatever that he had, or 79 and 77. You only get the 79 at that one position. Force you to build a team and assume, assume and force us to take swing guys, right? Assume injuries, right? We're going to put in that these guys, you're going to have to lose 2 starting pitchers and, I think we could tweak it and find some other ways, but it was wildly entertaining. I will tell you that. It was a labor of love. Yeah. It really sucked getting it started. Like going, I don't even know how to start this spreadsheet. Like, where do I?
Well, doing the research was hard. You had to get all that done ahead of time. But then once we started rolling, and and plus it was like then we were trying to outthink each other because especially once you took both Cain and Beltran, it's like, oh, I'm like, okay, it's on now. It's like we're gonna screw each other over. And it's funny because on the one hand, it's like, well, why would I take that position? You've already got. I could wait for as long as I want. You're not gonna. But no, you know what I'm thinking and. If I had waited any longer, I wouldn't have had a catcher and you wouldn't have had a third baseman. So like that part of it is fun too. There's a lot of psychological warfare.
Yeah, it was quite entertaining to say the least. All right. I hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back at it next week at our normal time. I think we'll be Sunday when we go next. But we'll be talking about again some of the free agent moves and everything that's going on. But for the holidays, we want to do a little something special. We enjoyed it, and let's remember that's what this podcast is for Rany and I to get enjoyment out of the Royals baseball. We hope we bring you along for the journey. But number one is for Rany and I to enjoy it. And I'm going to tell you the last 2 podcasts we have really enjoyed. We hope you enjoyed it as well. Remember, we're always brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Parking lot problems, they made them disappear since 1994. Every project comes with a written warranty. One contractor, all things parking lot. It's Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com. For the good doctor, Dr. Rany Jazayerli, I'm Soren Petro saying thank you very much for joining us here on